During an argument, my wife screamed, "I'm not sleeping with you ever again. Deal with it." So I did, and truly dealt with it in a way she never expected. She told me our marriage was over. Not with tears, not with regret, but with a casual cruelty that flipped a switch inside me. And in that instant, I knew I was about to dismantle her entire world. The kitchen felt cold, even with the pasta steaming on the table. Her words hung in the air, a final, brutal declaration, and the quiet click of something breaking inside me was louder than any shout. I'm Leo, and that moment, that single, cutting sentence from my wife, Chloe, was the unexpected catalyst for saving myself. But to understand that, I need to take you back, years before that Tuesday night in October. Chloe and I had been married for 6 years. For the first 4, honestly, I thought we had it all figured out. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our Friday night tradition of trying new restaurants and critiquing them. Sunday mornings meant coffee on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I really believed we were building something truly lasting. Then, around year 5, things subtly started to shift. You know that feeling, like when you spot a tiny crack in the wall, but convince yourself it's nothing serious? Chloe started coming home later. Her phone became an extension of her, always held at this weird, protective angle so I couldn't see the screen. Weekend plans? Cancelled, with vague excuses about being tired or needing alone time. I tried to talk to her, multiple times. Was something wrong? Was work stressing her out? Did we need to see someone? She'd always just brush me off, saying she was overwhelmed, she just needed space. And I gave it to her. I really did, because I thought that's what a good husband does. But looking back, I was just giving her room to drift further and further away. Then her best friend, Vanessa, entered our lives in a much bigger way. Vanessa had always been around, but suddenly she was at our house 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. And here's the thing about Vanessa you need to know, she'd been divorced 3 times, and somehow convinced herself this made her a relationship expert, not someone who clearly couldn't maintain one. Every time she showed up, she and Chloe would disappear, into the bedroom, out on the patio, and I'd hear these hushed, intense conversations that would stop cold the second I came anywhere near. After each of Vanessa's visits, Chloe would be noticeably colder, more distant. She'd dismiss anything I said or did. It was like Vanessa was slowly poisoning her against me, dripping toxic advice into her ear about how Chloe deserved better, how marriage was just settling, how all men are the same. Eventually, I started calling Vanessa the marriage killer in my head because everywhere she went, relationships seemed to die. By the 6th month of this downward spiral, Chloe had completely checked out. We went from sleeping in the same bed every night to her needing the guest room because, apparently, I snored too loud. News to me after 5 years. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped laughing at my jokes. Stopped any kind of physical contact. I tried everything to reconnect. I planned a surprise weekend getaway to a cabin she'd always wanted to visit. She canceled last minute, too much work. I bought her a beautiful necklace for our anniversary, saving up for it for months, and she barely glanced at it before putting it in a drawer. I even suggested couples therapy again, and she laughed in my face. Every attempt I made to save us was met with either indifference or outright hostility. I felt like I was living with a stranger who just happened to look like my wife. Then the really obvious signs started appearing, the kind you simply can't ignore. Chloe suddenly had a new wardrobe, tighter dresses, outfits clearly not meant for my eyes. She changed her hairstyle, something more dramatic, and started wearing makeup to work when she'd always been natural. Her phone became this third party in our marriage, always demanding her attention, always more important than anything I had to say. She had these networking events that required her to dress up and come home at midnight smelling like expensive wine and cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I'd see receipts from restaurants we'd never been to, charges on our joint credit card for hotels in our own city. It made no sense, unless you considered the one explanation I was desperately trying to avoid. And then there was Marcus. Marcus texted her at weird hours. Marcus needed her input on projects when no normal coworker would be working. Marcus seemed to have unlimited access to Chloe's time and attention in ways that I no longer did. The breaking point came on that Tuesday night in October. I'd made dinner, just pasta, the way she used to love it, and set the table, hoping we could actually talk for once. Chloe came home late again, barely acknowledged the food, and went straight to her phone. I asked her, as calmly as I could, if we could please just talk. I told her I felt like I was losing her, and I needed to understand why. That's when she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mix of contempt and exhaustion. She said the words that would echo in my head for months, "I'm not sleeping with you anymore, Leo. That part of our marriage is over. You're basically just my roommate now. Deal with it." The way she said it, so casual. So matter-of-fact. Like she was telling me she'd switched coffee brands. I stood there, looking at this woman I'd promised to love forever, and something inside me just went cold. And clear. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just looked at her and said, "Okay." In the calmest voice I've ever used. Then I walked out of the kitchen, went to our bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and started planning. You see, Chloe thought deal with it meant I'd just accept this new reality. That I'd become her convenient roommate, paying half the bills while she did whatever she wanted with whoever she wanted. But what she didn't understand was that I was going to deal with it, just not in any way she expected. I called my best friend, Ethan, told him I needed a place to crash, and he immediately said his guest room was mine for as long as I needed it. That same night, while Chloe was oblivious in the other room, I started moving my essential stuff out, bit by bit. Her casual cruelty had just activated a side of me she didn't know existed. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost through our house, gathering documents, making copies of important papers, taking photos of anything relevant. I opened a separate bank account, quietly redirected my direct deposit, leaving just enough in our joint account to cover my half of the bills and avoid immediate suspicion. Then, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I sat down and read our prenuptial agreement, the one we'd signed when we were young and in love, thinking we'd never need it. And there it was, in black and white legalese, the clause Chloe had apparently forgotten about, or never bothered to read carefully. In the event of proven infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits their claim to marital assets and spousal support. My lawyer father had insisted on including it. Young, naive me had felt almost guilty about it at the time. But sitting there, reading it 6 years later, I felt nothing but cold, calculated gratitude. Chloe had just handed me the keys to dismantling everything she thought was secure, and she didn't even know it yet. The game had changed. For the first time in months, I was holding all the cards. Living at Ethan's place gave me the clarity I desperately needed. And having him there as a sounding board made all the difference in what came next. Ethan wasn't just my best friend since college, he was the kind of guy who saw through nonsense instantly, with zero tolerance for people who played games with other people's lives. When I told him everything, he didn't waste time with sympathy or trying to see both sides. He just looked at me and said I needed concrete proof before I made any moves. That's when he pulled out a small, voice-activated recorder from his desk drawer, the kind private investigators use. He told me it was time to stop being naive and start protecting myself. I'd never considered recording Chloe. It felt like crossing some line. But then I remembered her face when she told me I was just a roommate, and that hesitation disappeared. The car was registered in both our names, and I'd been making half the payments. Legally, it was as much mine as hers. I planted the recorder in our car the next morning, tucked it under the passenger seat where she'd never think to look. And then I waited. For 3 days, I got nothing useful. Just her singing along to music and making normal work calls. But on day 4, I hit absolute gold. The kind of evidence that would make any divorce attorney salivate. Vanessa was in the car with her, and they were talking like I didn't exist, like I was some inconvenient obstacle they were strategizing around. Chloe's voice came through crystal clear, talking about Marcus, about how he was everything I wasn't, about how being with him made her feel alive again in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Then Vanessa asked the question that made my blood run cold, whether Marcus knew Chloe was still legally married. Chloe laughed and said she'd told Marcus we were separated, basically divorced already, that I was just dragging my feet on signing papers. The lies were so casual, so effortless, like she'd been practicing them for months. But the worst part, the part that truly destroyed whatever feelings I had left, was when Vanessa asked her directly if she felt guilty. And Chloe said no. That she'd stopped feeling guilty months ago because I was boring and predictable, and she deserved someone who excited her. I listened to that recording 5 times in Ethan's guest room. Each time, it hurt a little less and made me more determined. Ethan's reaction when I played it for him was exactly what I needed, pure, unfiltered rage on my behalf. The kind of loyalty that reminds you why some friendships last forever. He immediately started helping me build a bulletproof case. We created a detailed timeline of everything suspicious, every late night, every unexplained charge, every work event that didn't add up. I started screenshotting text messages before Chloe could delete them, downloading bank statements showing charges to restaurants and hotels I'd never been to. Documenting every single inconsistency. Then Ethan had another idea that felt a bit extreme but turned out to be crucial. He had a buddy who did private investigation work. For a reasonable fee, this guy could follow Chloe for a few days and document where she went during these supposed networking events. The photos came back within a week, and they were damning. Chloe and Marcus at a downtown hotel, the kind with hourly rates nobody uses for legitimate business meetings. Chloe and Marcus having dinner at an upscale Italian place, holding hands like teenagers. Chloe and Marcus in his car in a parking garage. I'll spare you the details, but it was crystal clear what was happening. Each photo felt like a punch to the gut, but weirdly, they also felt like ammunition. Like I was building an arsenal that would protect me from whatever manipulation she'd try later. I took everything to a divorce attorney Ethan recommended, a woman named Sarah. She had a reputation for being ruthless in court, but fair. When I spread out all my evidence on her desk, the audio recordings, the photos, the receipts, the timeline, the text message screenshots, she smiled. She told me this was the most thorough documentation she'd seen in years. She said cases like this, with a prenup and this level of proof, were about as close to a guaranteed win as you could get in family court. Sarah walked me through what would happen when I filed. Chloe would be served at her workplace, which would be humiliating, but necessary to prevent her from hiding assets or destroying evidence once she knew what was coming. The prenup, with its infidelity clause, meant she'd get nothing. No claim to the house we'd bought together, no spousal support, just whatever personal items she could prove were solely hers. Sarah asked if I was sure I wanted to go through with it because once we filed, there was no going back, and things would get ugly fast. I didn't hesitate. I told her to file the papers immediately. 2 days later, Sarah called me with news that made everything real. Chloe had been served with divorce papers at her office, right in front of her coworkers during their afternoon meeting. According to the process server, her reaction had been somewhere between shock and complete panic. Within an hour, my phone started blowing up. Chloe called 17 times in a row, each call going straight to voicemail because I'd blocked her number right after filing. Then she started texting from different numbers, from Vanessa's phone, from coworkers' phones. Each message more frantic and desperate than the last. She showed up at Ethan's apartment that same night, pounding on the door, demanding to talk to me. Screaming about how I couldn't just throw away 6 years of marriage without even discussing it with her first. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering she'd been throwing away our marriage for months without discussing anything. Ethan handled it perfectly. He opened the door with his phone already recording video and calmly told her she had 60 seconds to leave before he called the cops for harassment and trespassing. She tried to push past him, tried to physically force her way in, and that's when I stepped into view behind him. The look on her face when she saw me standing there, it was something I'll never forget. This mixture of desperation, rage, and confusion. Like she couldn't understand how her boring, predictable husband had suddenly grown a spine. That's when I did something I'd been planning for this exact moment. I pulled up my phone, opened the audio file of her conversation with Vanessa in the car, and pressed play. Her own voice filled the hallway, talking about Marcus, about lying to him about our marriage status, about how I was boring and she deserved someone better. I watched all the color drain from her face as she realized how screwed she was. She tried to grab my phone, tried to claim the recording was illegal and wouldn't hold up in court. She tried every desperate plea she could think of. But Ethan just calmly stated that we were in a one-party consent state, meaning recordings made in jointly owned property were legal and admissible, and that my attorney had already confirmed everything was above board. Then Vanessa showed up, because of course she did, and tried to spin the whole situation like I was the villain for spying on my own wife. That's when Ethan destroyed her with a single sentence I wish I'd recorded: "You've been divorced 3 times and you're giving marriage advice?" That's like taking driving lessons from someone who's totaled every car they've owned. The confrontation ended with Chloe in tears on the hallway floor, Vanessa trying to console her while shooting daggers at me and Ethan. Ethan firmly closed and locked the door. Inside the apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: complete control over my own life. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Chloe's family, particularly her mother, who apparently thought screaming at me through text messages would somehow change my mind or make me feel guilty. I saved every single message, forwarded them all to Sarah for documentation, and then did something that felt incredibly satisfying. I sent Chloe's mother the entire evidence package, every photo, every recording transcript, every receipt, with a simple message: "This is why." She went silent after that. And from what I heard later through mutual friends, she told Chloe to sign whatever papers I put in front of her, because fighting this would only make things worse, more public, and way more expensive for everyone involved. The next 3 months were a masterclass in watching someone's life unravel while mine slowly rebuilt itself. Chloe's lawyers tried everything to fight the prenup, claiming it was signed under duress or that the infidelity clause was unreasonably harsh. But Sarah shut down every attempt with a precision that made me grateful I'd hired her. The evidence was too solid. The prenup was ironclad. Most importantly, Chloe had no leg to stand on because she'd been caught red-handed in ways that left zero room for interpretation. Her legal team eventually advised her to just sign the settlement agreement and move on, because dragging this out in court would only cost her more money she didn't have and expose her affair even more publicly than it already was. The actual signing happened at Sarah's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Part of me dreaded seeing Chloe again after 3 months of silence. She walked into that conference room looking completely different from the woman I'd married, thinner, older somehow, with dark circles under her eyes and this defeated posture that would have made me feel sorry for her if I hadn't remembered everything she'd done. She tried the waterworks immediately, crying about her terrible mistakes, how we could still fix this if I just gave her one more chance. I looked at her across that conference table and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just this cold indifference that I think hurt her more than any emotional reaction would have. Sarah guided us through the paperwork with professional efficiency. When it came time for Chloe to sign, she hesitated, looking at me one last time like I might suddenly change my mind. I just stared back and waited. She signed. Just like that. 6 years of marriage ended with a signature on a legal document. What happened to Chloe after the divorce was finalized was almost poetic in how everything fell apart for her. Marcus, her exciting affair partner who made her feel so alive, dumped her within 2 weeks of our divorce being finalized. Turns out he was only interested in the thrill of an affair, the forbidden aspect of sneaking around. Once she was available and came with the baggage of a messy divorce, he wanted nothing to do with her. She tried to keep him, from what I heard, calling and texting constantly, showing up at his place unannounced, but he'd already moved on to someone new. And Vanessa, her toxic best friend who'd encouraged all of this, completely ghosted her once the drama died down. See, people like Vanessa don't care about their friends. They care about chaos and drama and having someone vulnerable to manipulate. Once Chloe was no longer in crisis mode and couldn't provide entertainment, Vanessa just vanished. Chloe ended up moving into a small 1-bedroom apartment across town, a massive downgrade from the house we'd built our life in. From what I gathered through the grapevine, she spent most of her time alone, trying to figure out where everything went so wrong. Meanwhile, my life was improving in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I bought a new house about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Nothing huge, but it was mine, with no memories of Chloe attached to any room. I adopted a 3-year-old German Shepherd mix named Rocky from the local rescue, who had more loyalty in his furry body than Chloe had shown in 6 years of marriage. Ethan and I started a consulting business together, something we'd talked about for years but never had the courage to pursue, and it took off faster than either of us expected. Having a project to focus on, something separate from my failed marriage, gave me the purpose and direction I desperately needed. I started going to the gym regularly, not to prove anything, but because it felt good to take care of myself again. I went on a few dates here and there, nothing serious, just reminding myself what it felt like to have someone interested in getting to know me rather than just tolerating my presence. About 8 months after the divorce, Chloe started trying to contact me again. It started with a simple text asking how I was doing, which I ignored. Then came longer messages about how she'd been doing therapy and realized what she'd thrown away. Then messages about self-improvement, how she understood now that she'd sabotaged the best thing in her life. Each message got progressively more desperate, trying different angles to get a response from me. She tried nostalgia, reminding me of good times. She tried guilt, talking about how lonely she was. She even tried anger, accusing me of being cold and unforgiving. None of it worked, because I'd done something crucial during those months after the divorce. I completely detached from her and everything we'd been. She was just a person I used to know, someone from my past who no longer had any power over my present or future. The final contact I had with anything related to Chloe was almost a year after the divorce, when I ran into her at a coffee shop completely by accident. She was there with someone, a guy who looked uncomfortable, checking his phone like he was looking for an escape route. She saw me walk in, and I watched her face go through this journey of emotions: surprise, hope, fear, resignation. I gave her a polite nod, the kind you'd give any stranger, ordered my coffee, and left without saying a word. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated, or even particularly satisfied. I just felt free. That night, I got one last text from her. Just 3 words: "I'm sorry, Leo." I read it, thought about responding for maybe 5 seconds, and then deleted it without replying. Some apologies come too late. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, and some chapters of your life just need to stay closed. Looking back now, almost 2 years after that Tuesday night when she told me to deal with being her roommate, I can say with complete honesty that her telling me that was the best thing she could have done for me. It forced me to see clearly what I'd been trying to ignore for months. It gave me the push I needed to value myself enough to walk away. And it led me to a life that's infinitely better than the one I was settling for. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just grateful that I had the strength to deal with it the way I did. My life now is mine. Built on my terms, surrounded by people who value me, and that's worth more than any marriage held together by obligation and one person's willingness to accept scraps of affection. What would you have done in my shoes?